everyone. Welcome to another episode of the TCF True Scary Stories podcast with your host, the Creepy Fox. Tonight, join me as we relive and retell your true scary stories from buses and bus stations that are going to chill you to the bone. Remember, friends, if you guys would like to be featured on a future episode, then make sure you send in your story using my user submissions email, tcfnarrations@gmail.com. But with that said, make sure to sit back, relax, and enjoy these true scary bus and bus station stories. Let's go. I took the wrong bus, and it gets worse. Before I begin, I'll admit, there is a lot of setup that leads to my actual scary encounter. I wrote it out this way because I really want you all to experience this from the start, all the way up until the end. So please stick with me. I promise it's worth it. Also, for reference, this is from the perspective of a 27-year-old female. Anyways, this occurred 2 years ago, when I was commuting from my work all the way back home. To kind of give you some context, every morning I'll take the train in Fullerton, California to work, in Riverside, California. After I'm off, I take 2 different buses, starting in Riverside to Anaheim, which drops me off right in front of Disneyland, and then I take the last bus back to Fullerton. I actually preferred it this way because I didn't want to put so many miles on my car, and I wouldn't have to worry about getting service done more often than I needed to. And besides, I've never had any problems with public transportation. I've actually met some really great people traveling this way, and one friend is someone I still play video games, even today. However, there was one evening I made a misjudgment that saw me going through quite the scary encounter. So, again, it started like any other afternoon. I clocked off of work, and I immediately head over to downtown Riverside so I could wait for my first of 2 buses. I recall it being a slightly chilly overcast day, with some wind here and there, as I sat down on a bench, sipping on some gas station coffee that I had picked up only minutes prior. Eventually, the bus arrives. Along with 7 or 8 bus goers, we get on, and we start to make the trip to Anaheim. Now, funny enough, I was listening to some scary stories on my phone, and I got so lost in the storytelling that I hadn't realized just how quickly we had gotten to our first destination, as I saw the Disneyland sign in my peripheral vision. Nice. This was perfect, because I couldn't wait to get home and step into the shower, and just relax after a long day of dealing with people and the daily stress of work. As I get off the bus, I notice that not even 20 seconds later, there is another bus approaching from behind me. Now, I normally will take the 43 bus north, which takes me toward Fullerton, an average 10-minute ride. So I didn't really second-guess this bus as it arrives, but I did notice there is no signage on the front, which distinguishes this bus from the other. Now, what do I mean? Well, there are actually 2 bus numbers. One heads towards Fullerton, the 43. The other heads towards San Bernardino, the 200. The complete opposite way. Now, I never made the mistake of taking the wrong bus home, thus myself all confident, not considering seeing any clarification on which bus I was taking. And by the way, still listening to my scary stories on my phone. Step into the bus, and I first notice there is a different bus driver. My couple of years taking the 43 bus towards Fullerton, I'd gotten to know each of the bus drivers. This lady, however, was completely brand new. I remember giving her a friendly hello and smile like I normally do with each of the bus drivers, but she had the resting, you-know-what face that pretty much read, "Leave me alone and don't talk to me." A bit disappointed, I swiped my bus pass and I head toward the back, my usual spot, next to a window, and I continue to focus on listening to the scary stories as a couple of more bus riders join me. The bus now begins to take off, and I smile knowing I'd be home soon, relaxing in my shower. Well, as I looked at the passengers, I noticed I didn't recognize any of them. The nice Disney cast members I would usually catch and have a chat with were nowhere to be seen. And even the cool homeless guy who had this really sweet acoustic guitar was missing in action. Maybe perhaps I just missed them, and they had taken the bus before this one. Strange, considering 95% of the time I'd see at least one of them. Now, if you haven't already come to the conclusion, I'll explain it to you in simple terms. I was on the wrong bus, and sadly, it wasn't until we got on the freeway I realized my mistake. Immediately, I head toward the bus driver and ask her where in the heck we were going, as I needed to go to Fullerton. She scoffed at my remark, and with her sassy attitude, she mentioned we were going toward San Bernardino. Well, that couldn't be right, I tell her. I reassured her this had to be the 43 bus, but she tells me it wasn't. It was the 200 bus, heading toward San Bernardino. Well, great. The no signage on the front messed me up, and now I was stuck not knowing if there'd be a bus that could take me back to Anaheim, then back to Fullerton. Oh, what a mess. By the way, did I forget to mention this bus driver's attitude? Yeah, she didn't even care that I was on the wrong bus. She just told me to go back to my seats and I can figure it out when I get to the bus station. Yeah, you heard right. So that I can figure it out. Not we, as in her and I. Man, I really hope they got somebody new. Anyways, I head toward my same spot, and an elderly gentleman who had listened to my remarks stops me along the way and says there is a bus that returns to Fullerton, and that I'm not the first one to make this mistake. Well, I'm able to confirm his statement when I look at the bus schedule, and I see that indeed, about 30 minutes after I arrive at the bus station, I can catch a bus back to Anaheim. Alrighty. Annoying. But hey, at least I knew I wouldn't have to rack up quite a bill using Uber or Lyft. So eventually we arrive at the bus station, and the first thing I noticed, apart from it now being dark, was just how run down the place was. There was a lot of trash scattered across the street, homeless people and junkies arguing with one another, and just this overall sense of dread that told me, girl, you need to leave right now. And thus, the waiting game begins as I stand next to the bus stop and eagerly await my rescue, so to speak. I unfortunately made the completely foolish mistake of continuing to have my earphones in my ears, hoping I could wash away any sort of sounds of trouble and be in my own personal safe haven. That is until, of course, this homeless man walks up to me and, without even saying a word, rips the earphones out of my ears. "What's your problem?" I bark at him, taking a step back in confusion. "Do you have some money on you I can borrow?" he asks me, with the smell of alcohol leaking out of his breath. I tell him no, and so I begin to walk away, and all of a sudden I hear him yell at me. "Hey, I was talking to you," he remarks, beginning to chase me down with a look of anger. I'm starting to get a bit freaked out as nobody is saying anything, and it appears as if this is a normal occurrence around these parts. Now, being chased by some crazy dude is already creepy enough, but when he takes out a used syringe and then begins to chase you, that's when I lost my cool. I remember running over to a convenience store and bumping into a security guard who was grabbing some donuts and talking with the cashier. As I began explaining my situation, out of breath and pointing toward the street I had arrived from, the homeless man sorta just stopped in his tracks and looked at me from a streetlight with this really crazy and deranged look. He was then joined by another homeless guy, and they just stared at me for a few seconds before walking off in the complete opposite direction. Now, to say I was freaked out would definitely be an understatement. Just imagine it being nighttime, being somewhere you've never been before, and being chased by a crazy man with a needle. I don't care how tough or brave you are, you're gonna react. At any rate, the security guard was nice enough to not only escort me back to the bus station, but he waited alongside me until the bus arrived, and I made it back to Anaheim, then to Fullerton, without any further complications. Since that incident, I continue to take the bus. There was a point things did get impacted because of the lockdowns, but it settled, at least for the time being. Now, even though I haven't made the same mistake of taking the wrong bus, I always ask the bus driver anyways if I'm going the right direction, even if I know the answer is going to be yes. By the way, to the security guard at the San Bernardino bus station, if my story sounds familiar to you, and you're somehow a fan of the creepy fox and listen to his stories, it would be great to hear from you, even though I realize the chances of him hearing this message are quite low. I just hope all is well, and thank you once again for helping out this lost girl get home. Hey there friends, it's the Creepy Fox here. Just really quickly before we get on with the video, I just wanted to let you all know that in case you didn't know, I'm currently organizing a charity for St. Jude. We're trying to raise money and funds to help find cures for both common and rare diseases. Now, if this is something that you're interested in, you want to go ahead and help us out, check right below the video player. Even just $1 goes a long way, and I kind of figured that, this is kind of a nice way for all of us to come together in the Creepy Fox family and do some good and raise some money. So yeah, go ahead and check that out. Yeah, but other than that, let's continue on with today's video. Bus Station Thief. Back in the early 2000s, I was hopping in between different jobs, trying to earn money to help get me through college. After leaving IHOP, where I worked as a waiter, I left because of bad management, by the way. A friend of my dad's told me there was an opening at a little liquor store as a cashier at the bus station in my city. It really didn't sound like something I would want to do, but with the job and position more or less handed over to me, I figured what's the worst that could possibly happen. Apparently, a lot. I only worked there for 3 months in the summer before I quit because of a very scary incident that, to this day, I'll sometimes think about and wonder back, what might have happened had things not gone the way they did. Now, combining this young, 23-year-old kid in a liquor store, you're bound to get plenty of weirdos. However, I grew up in a household with 2 older brothers who are in the military, thus I thought I could handle myself in any situation. I even took self-defense courses, and always carried pepper spray on my person. I like to think those details, along with my do not mess with me attitude and facial expressions, were the reason why most people were intimidated by me, even though I'm a really nice guy. That wasn't exactly the case this time. Anyways, the night in question that would make me consider my employment at that liquor store was on a weekday evening when it's just me and a couple of customers. These 2 customers were regulars. They'd always come to check up on me, as well as get their hot dogs and sodas. Really cool dudes. I actually kinda missed them. I considered them like my uncles. So it's approximately 10 p.m., and the 2 customers I mentioned are outside the liquor store, sitting at a bench that overlooks the bus station. As for myself, I'm sitting there organizing the front counter, which consisted of a display of Cheetos chips, lottery tickets, and various assortments of candies and chocolates. Out of nowhere, I heard the front doorbell chime, and I looked up to see a man with a hoodie covering his face enter the store, and he immediately walked behind one of the aisles. I normally greeted customers who entered, but this guy just ignored me completely. Whatever, I thought. You can't be friendly to everyone. So I continued to organize the front counter, when I happened to look at the security cameras just a couple of minutes later. I saw that man who entered the store had taken out a box of Coors Light from the back refrigerators, and with a knife was opening the box. He then proceeded to indulge in said drinks, like this was his house. My immediate thought was my boss was going to fire me if he found out a customer was drinking beer without paying, especially on the premise. However, my main concern was this guy has a knife, and alcohol and knives don't exactly mix well. So what do? Well, I proceeded to call the police, which luckily the police station was only a few blocks away. Now as I'm talking on the phone, the man walked over to the front counter, and he starts asking me in a paranoid tone, who I was talking to and why I was acting so nervously. All I remember saying was police were on the way and that he was in a lot of trouble. Now, at this point, I got a better look at the man, and I saw that his facial expression went to one of anger, and in one quick motion, he began making his way over the front counter with the knife. I dropped the phone, and I immediately booked it outside, screaming and trying to get someone's attention. Well, remember the two regulars? Yeah, they kept me safe as we run over to the bus station to try and get to safety. Thankfully, police were able to get there in record time, and as the man booked it out of the little liquor store, now with a grocery bag with money inside, police demand him to get to the ground. He does, as the man drops to the floor and surrenders almost instantly, throwing the knife to the side. Police are then able to make a quick arrest, and this was when we walked over, and I basically explained to the police I was the one who called about the disturbance with a man and a knife. Essentially, my boss arrived soon after, and I ended up giving my statement, going into detail on what the man had done. That was pretty much it. I continued to work there for about another month, until I quit to focus entirely on my studies. Fast forward all these years later, and I wonder what might have happened had I not been so quick to react and run away from the danger. I'm not sure, but that's my story of when I used to work at the bus station as a cashier at a liquor store. Learn from me. Speak up. This happened in my first year of college. I was taking the bus to and from campus every day, as free bus rides were part of the tuition I was paying for. This is what allowed me to eventually save up for my own car. But as this story is more focused on my bus riding days, we're going to instead focus our attention on that. So it was during final season. Now obviously there are hundreds of students cramming and doing all they can to fit as much knowledge as possible into a short series of a few days. I was one of these many college students who found themselves staying until around 8 or 9 p.m., studying in the library with fellow friends. By the time I made it to the bus stop, I actually considered just calling for an Uber or taking up the offer from one of my friends who said she could take me home. But as I'm the kind of person who doesn't really like to bother people, even though people always tell me I'm not a bother at all, there I stood, waiting around in the low 50-degree weather, palms shaking and eyes heavy from the lack of sleep. After waiting approximately 10 minutes all by myself, the bus eventually arrives, and I get on board seeing there are only two people. A man middle-aged, who had a Carl's Jr. employee's outfit toward the front, and another man in the middle seats, who I could best describe as in his 40s, having some light acne across his face, was really skinny, long greasy hair, and has a backpack on the seat beside him. Now as I'm about to pass him, looking at my phone trying not to make eye contact as I'm awkward and shy, he actually reached out and grabbed my arm, which was completely unexpected and caught me by surprise. I actually almost fell back, but I was able to catch myself on one of the bus poles, that is without my phone falling to the ground. "What's your problem? Keep your hands to yourself," I say, trying to get the attention of the bus driver and the rider. Surprised they don't bat an eye, mostly because I didn't say it loud enough, which I look back on and regret. "You have a really pretty face. So, are you a student at this school?" he said, as I completely ignored him, grabbed my cell phone, and head toward the back to try and forget him. I recall he just cursed something under his breath, before returning his attention back to the window, and minded his own business. Again, I'm a pretty shy college student, and I should have spoken up more, but I decided just to try and forget him. Maybe he wasn't all there in the head, so to speak, and I was making a big deal. Not even 2 minutes later, focusing my attention at my Instagram feed on my phone, the man walks over to my aisle and takes a seat at the seats next to me. I can remember beginning to grow scared as he asks me for my name, and if I had a boyfriend, and if I was seeing anyone. I told him no as I start to get up and try to head back toward the front, but he tries to once again grab my arm. I manage to pull away and I take a seat right next to the man with the Carl's Jr. outfit. I regret not speaking up, but at least the creep from earlier stayed in the back. Now, all I could hope for was that he would get off the bus and I can go about my night. Well, what do you expect? It seems he's determined to follow me, no matter what it takes. Because when I get off at my bus stop, he gets off too, and then he begins to follow me, albeit at a bit of a distance. It wasn't until I exited the bus depot and began to make my way toward the residential areas that I noticed he's still behind me, but he's now getting closer. I'm really starting to freak out, but I don't want to just run because I fear he's going to feed off my emotions. So I decided to take out my phone, and I dialed for my best friend, who luckily answered immediately.
Hey, so there's this dude following me. You want to come outside and kick his teeth in?
I said nervously, hoping this statement would get the guy to turn away. My friend was confused. I couldn't blame her. And just when it seems things are going in the right direction, my statement seems to have angered him, as all of a sudden, like a flip of a switch, he goes into a full-on sprint. I run like an Olympian, as he now begins to follow me down a street, a few blocks from my home, and I'm trying to find somebody who can possibly come to my assistance. Sadly, no one. That was until I began screaming like a child. Moments later, further down the street, I saw a porch light come on, and a man steps outside with his German Shepherd. I remember running over to him, as the German Shepherd runs up to the fence, and then begins to bark. "There's a man chasing me," I tell him out of breath, and then pointing in the opposite direction. As for the creep, I could see that he now stopped about halfway down the street, and began to walk in the opposite direction, where he had chased me from. Luckily for me, the homeowner was kind enough to walk me back home with his older son and their German Shepherd. Now, I have a lot of regrets regarding that night. 1, not speaking up on the bus, and 2, not calling for the police, as this creep might have tried going after somebody else. Yeah, he didn't seem to have any sort of weapon on him, which I guess is a good thing. And I know being chased by some random crazy man at night is something you might hear all too commonly. But that doesn't take away of just how fearful it became. My best advice to all of you: you don't have to be afraid to take public transportation. There are so many people out there who don't have a choice. Do learn from me, and speak up. Yes, I know the bus driver and the other bus rider didn't really make a big fuss, but I blame that on me not really overselling the possible danger I was in. So act like a drama queen, even if you get embarrassed. It's better to be embarrassed than to have something really bad happen to you. At least, that's what I think. He liked me a little too much. This happened in 2002. Now, before I get started, I apologize if my English isn't perfect, as it isn't my first language. For starters, I'm female, and I was 19 years old. I was working at a small family-owned coffee shop, where our customers are normally college students, pretty much people my age. Anyways, the night in question was what I wanted to go ahead and bring up to you all. Now, at the time, I didn't have a car, and so I relied heavily on the bus. The nice part was the bus stop was literally across the street from the coffee shop, so I didn't have to go too far. So I was closing that night, and at around 10:15 p.m., I sat down at the bus stop's bench, looking down at my phone and waiting for the bus, which was to arrive at around 10:28 p.m. As I looked at some random memes, I heard the cars pass by, and that's when I started to hear movement behind me in the shrubbery. When I turned around, this random man stumbled out toward me. Now right away I could tell that this man was drunk because of the smell of beer that came out of his breath. I cringed a bit as I reached for my pepper spray in my purse, while keeping my eyes on him at all times. Do you happen to have some change on you? He says, with a creepy look. I told him I had none, which then causes him to take a seat next to me. I go ahead and scoot closer to the other side of the bench, while he just sat there mumbling some random things under his breath. I was almost considering leaving and walking home, but it's at least a 45-minute walk home. Also, this was a time before Uber and Lyft were really a thing, so there was that. Okay, so I'm just sitting there uncomfortably when he starts with the questions. I try being polite and answering with short responses, until it comes to him wanting to know if I would go out with him. Of course, I told him I wasn't interested, and this seems to only anger him even more. He gets up and starts punching the bus stop sign, going on about how girls won't give him a chance, and how I would be sorry. I slowly started to get up again, keeping my hands on my pepper spray, just hoping the bus would get here soon. Why my dumb self just didn't run away, I don't know, but there I was. Nevertheless, he's arguing with himself for another couple of minutes, when I finally see the bus headlights coming down the road. At least, I would be saved. I excuse myself and walk right past him, but then he manages to grab me. Now, as he grabbed me, he spun me around, and this is when I use my momentum to create a fist, and then as hard as I could, smack him right in the temple. He lets go, and I take off, waving down the bus driver. The last thing I remember was jumping in, as the man came running up to the bus, trying to grab me. The bus driver quickly shut the doors on him, though, and he drives away. When I got home, I ended up calling the police. A couple of days later, it was my day off, and my coworker called me saying some creep was looking for me. He described him exactly like the man who I had encountered a few nights ago. My coworker even told me that the creep had a large bruise on his temple. Sounded like a perfect match. Anyways, after talking with my manager, I ended up getting scheduled during the mornings, and I always had somebody pick me up at night, whether it be a friend or a family member. I quit a few months after, and I moved to another town, and I never saw him again.